stars, professional athletes, and politicians all choose to live their lives out in the public spotlight. The attention that they get from their friends, their fans, and their enemies is all part of the price of celebrity. But what about their children who, like it or not, have to share that intense public scrutiny? What price do they pay for the unasked-for privilege of having public parents?
All Jerry Falwell did was lie to my father. Just outright lies to him, telling him, you can come back anytime you want, and you can have the ministry back, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then what does he do on TV? Tells Dad right on TV, you cannot ever come back to Heritage USA.
When the PTL Church scandal first broke in 1987, Jim Bakker and his family were determined to fight it out. The family's personal tragedy mesmerized the press for 2 years. The story was bursting with sex, money, greed, and God. When it was finally over in 1989, with Bakker's sentence of up to 45 years in prison, we wondered what would become of the children involved. And when Congressman Leo Ryan journeyed to the jungles of Jonestown, Guyana in 1978, the father of two didn't realize he would never see his children again.
When we got to the airstrip itself, and when the gunmen or temple members returned to the strip, then we knew that we were in some difficulty, that most likely there would be some trouble. We didn't see any guns to that point, so we didn't realize there was going to be an attack on a bunch of unarmed people.
Congressman Ryan, along with 4 other people, were gunned down in cold blood as they prepared to leave the People's Temple, the cult commune of the infamous Reverend Jim Jones. After shooting Ryan and the 4 others, Jones ordered 900 of his followers to drink a fatal concoction of Kool-Aid laced with cyanide. Jonestown has now gone down in history as the largest single cult killing. Pat Ryan, one of Leo Ryan's 2 children, is here to tell us about living through her sorrow in the public eye. I mentioned, Patricia, that you heard of the tragedy over the radio. Just seeing the old newsreel clip right now, I notice how you are affected by it.
My heart is beating a million miles a minute.
But what must it be like to hear of so personal a tragedy in so public a way?
Let me get my breath first. I think most of you can probably imagine how it would feel. I heard about it in the radio. The rest of my family heard about it in different ways. But what I heard was that my father had been shot and possibly killed. And I did not hear that he was dead, so I immediately turned the radio off and went to my family's home. But my initial reaction was, I can't hear anymore, and I don't, my brain just was on overload. I couldn't deal with the reality of what might have happened.
Even after you determined that, in fact, your dad had been murdered, were you permitted to grieve in the way that ordinary families can grieve the loss of a loved one?
The answer to that is obviously no. I mean, you know as well as anybody how the media is. Because of the enormity of that situation, and because my father was the only congressman to ever be killed in the line of duty, we were just deluged with press and phone calls, and not to mention constituents. He was a very public man, so there were a lot of people who cared about him.
I lost a friend there, Bob Brown, the NBC cameraman who was cut down, had been my cameraman for years, and I remember how stunned and shocked and saddened I was, but at least nobody bugged me. During the time of your grief, there were cameramen on your front lawn. The story preoccupied the San Francisco Bay Area, obviously, so many of the victims came from that area. That's where the People's Temple had been based for so long. To live it and relive it and relive it, that must have just exacerbated your pain.
It made it very difficult. It was difficult for a long time. I mean, and even now, seeing things like this, I see that film clip of my father being killed over and over again, and it's, and it's in a way it's good to know that something so tragic, there's a lesson to be learned, which is why I'm involved in an organization called the Cult Awareness Network now. And I don't want people to forget in a way, but it's very difficult to be reminded in a public way.
I remember hearing that your sister had become involved in a cult. Is she still?
My sister was involved with Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, who you may have heard about. He was up in Oregon, had a big commune, and he was actually deported and convicted of I guess it was immigration fraud, among other things. And she was left stranded along with a lot of other people, but she's never really come to grips with what it really was that she was involved with. She's never turned her back on him. He's dead now, but she still has pictures of him in her house.
Is she home, or is she still living with other cult members?
She's away. She's away from it. She's doing her own thing. She's living her own life. But
Do you
she
think
really
her problems had to do with what happened to your dad?
I have a lot of theories on what happened. I think that what we went through was very difficult and has had fallout in a lot of different ways with my brothers and sisters. I think my sister was looking for something before my father was killed, but I think that having a father who was such a major figure in our lives, he was almost a bigger-than-life figure, having somebody like that not only die, but die in the way that he did, I think that she probably needed to fill that void somehow.